Hi, it's Dr. Parikh. You are almost to the end of the semester. You have your research proposal pretty much written, and now you have to do a self-assessment using the same peer review form. If you're watching this video at the beginning of the week, I have a couple suggestions for ways you could do it. You could watch the whole video now, but I would say maybe watch it on double speed and just kind of try to get a sense of what do I need to do as I'm revising my paper. And then when you are done revising your paper, because that's when you do this assessment, your paper should be pretty much ready to go, as good as you can get it. And then you sit down and do this self-assessment. And so at that point, I recommend playing this video either for the first time or playing it again. And I recommend pausing every so often so you can actually make changes, check your paper. So some things you can probably just do as I'm talking about them. Other things you'll need to pause the video, or you can also slow the video down so that you can keep up with me as I'm talking for the most part. Make sure this is an active process. So I would have, if I were to sit down to do it, here's what I would do. I would print out a full copy of my paper. I like to, when I'm just reviewing like this, I like to print 2 pages to a sheet. It saves some paper, and it also, like, not just double-sided, but actually the sheet itself, like I can show you right here. I've done that with my little checklist. I don't mind the small print, so it works well for me. But that lets me also see more at a time, so I can look at 2 pages at a time that way. I like to do that when I'm doing this kind of revision. But either way, I would have a hard copy of the paper in front of me. I would have on my screen, I would have this video running up in the corner. And then I would also have obviously the peer editing feedback form that you need to actually fill out for the self-assessment. But I would also have a copy of my paper, because as you find mistakes, change them. The entire purpose of this self-assessment is so that you catch as many mistakes as you possibly can. I love grading good papers and giving lots of points for them. Please help me do that. So those are the ways I recommend using this video to help you do as well as possible. And now I'm going to go through in a really detailed way. I'm going to go through each section. So the cover page, that's your title page. Is there a title? And make sure that your title is specific to your topic, especially now that you have a research proposal. Make sure your name and the university are below it, and check the page number in the running head. Check the font, the spacing, the whole deal. One of the reasons that I required you to have access to Word is that when you use other editors like Pages or especially Google Docs, funky things happen when you convert it. And it may look fine as it is, and then you try to convert it into a Word document or a PDF, and things just seem to go haywire sometimes. If you're using a Mac, be very careful about fonts. The fonts will change weirdly when you insert page numbers or do things like that. The newest version of Word might have fixed that. I haven't quite gotten my head wrapped around the way that you insert page numbers now. If you start with the template and you stay in Word the entire time, these things should be reasonably easy for you. Next page is the abstract. Remember, the abstract does not, like, that heading does not get bolded, although it doesn't say that here. So checking the number of words, whether it's telling you the main point, whether you know what claims will be used, and then it adds in, does it tell you the research question or hypothesis? And remember, sometimes, like in this case, it's not supposed to be indented, actually. So if it's indented, that's a problem. Usually the correct answer to these questions is yes. So if there's ever a time where no is the answer you want, I will specifically tell you that. So there's something to help you check your headings. This is where I find it really useful to have like two sheets to a page, because I can sort of it's easier for me to get a bird's eye view of things like the headings. So check the bold, check whether things are centered or over to the left. As a reminder, abstract and references are not bolded, just like the title at the top of the body of your paper is not bolded. And it goes through the roadmap paragraph. Does the first paragraph, does it explain why this is important? Does it grab the reader's attention? Is there a clear thesis statement? And now you also look, is there a clear research question or hypothesis? And I want you to now, so read that paragraph, set your paper aside, and try to say in your own words, what does that paragraph say is the main point of the paper? And really think about whether the paragraph is giving the same impression that you wanted it to. Is it doing what you want it to do? The body of your paper. So this is, it's not quite as detailed as some of the, for example, when you gave feedback specifically on the literature, or you will give more feedback later. So basically, in general, does it provide themes or elements to support the thesis statement or the research question? And you say yes or no, and kind of what are those elements? Are those elements backed up with research and literature? Are they cited correctly? And does each element make sense? The more time you take, the more thoughtful you are with this assignment, the better reflection you're going to get. If you kind of zoom through and just say whatever, you're going to get a rushed quality. And really, as long as you give some responses here and are somewhat thoughtful, you're going to get points for the assignment. But the assignment isn't here for me, it's here for you. And so you get out what you put in. Background paragraph, does it start with a topic sentence? Does it offer broad information? Is that cited and not from a textbook? We've talked a lot about how textbooks are secondary sources. It's where someone has put together, has used all these articles and books and things to put together a review that's meant to be really accessible to students. But for this, I don't want you to use textbooks. I want you to use primary sources. So articles and books that are written to be used by professionals in the field, because when you're writing in psychology, you are writing as a professional in the field. Does it funnel down? And is the specific topic background cited? So in that background paragraph, you'll have one citation that might be like an article or book that's separate from, that you went out and found just for this paragraph. But you should be able to have one citation that is specific to this paper. First theme. Is the heading clearly related to what you're discussing? And if not, for you, it would just be go and change it. Does each paragraph have a topic sentence? So again, these are things that you can kind of tick off. Is there a topic sentence? And a topic sentence should be broad. It should encompass everything in the paragraph, and it should not have a citation because it should be too broad to have a citation. If you can cite it from just one article, it's not encompassing everything in the paragraph, or your paragraph doesn't really have things from two authors. Are there at least 2 articles cited for each paragraph? Are there at least 3 cited for each theme? And then again, what is the main point of the theme? So take a moment, think about what is, not what you wanted to say, but what did you say? And then reflect on, was that what you meant to say? Theme 2 is exactly the same, so I'll skip it. Now we get down to the present study. So does the paragraph start with the most important points so far? So are you sort of giving a summary of what should people be taking from your introduction so far? How does the present study fill a gap in the literature? So why is it needed? And again, you should write this in your paragraph, but look at that paragraph and see if a naive reader would actually be able to answer this. So say again in your own words, and here you can use more casual language as part of this feedback form. But how does it fill a gap? Is there a clear purpose? Do you explain how it's going to further the knowledge? And then does it end with a research question or hypothesis? Method section, I break it down for each subsection of the method. So just sort of as you need to have each of these 3, so just kind of mark them off as you go. As a reminder, you can do this electronically or by hand. I tend to do most things electronically, but it's up to you. If you do it by hand, just PDF it at the end and upload the PDF. What are the 2 other demographic factors that you're measuring? Is it clear how participants are going to be recruited? What are the inclusion criteria? That's a double. I don't know if that was supposed to be something else, but oh well. What is the incentive? Do you know how groups will be divided? And it's okay to say no. If your groups are not being randomly, or if you're not going to, say, divide groups based on demographics like men and women, or by age, or by diagnostic history, it's okay to say no. But it's important for you to be clear on what you're doing. And if you are dividing on some variable, you need to say how it'll be checked for differences. And that's usually going to have to do with the two other demographic factors. Or it might be, you might check for differences in age or differences in race and ethnicity between the groups. And then does the author do you list two possible reasons for attrition or dropout? That should all be in one paragraph, maybe two if it's feeling really long and unwieldy, but you don't have to say much about each of these things. You can be pretty concise. Measures, does it explain what the measure is for? Are there two citations for the measure? Are the citations in alphabetical order? So when you have two citations for the same sentence, so you're going to cite the article where you found it, and you're also going to cite, as far as you can tell, the original article for that measure. And when you do this, you never change the order of authors for a single citation. And that's because that order is meaningful. It tells you how much each person contributed. Occasionally you will see like a large study with like 7 to 10 authors where it's clear that they just decided to list alphabetically. And that's probably because everybody contributed a lot to it and they wanted, they didn't want to unfairly overrepresent anybody's contribution. So they said, okay, let's just go alphabetically. That's pretty rare though, and that's usually a really large group that does that. I've only seen it a few times, and I've seen a lot of articles over the years. Almost always, like 98% of the time or more, the author order represents how many people or how much each person contributed to the article, and so it's important to keep that to recognize what each contribution was. Also, sometimes you'll have multiple articles written by the same group of people in the same year. And so when you have different orders of authors, that can help you differentiate between them. But when you're listing more than one author or more than one article for a specific sentence citation, you go in order of first author's last name, just like you do in the reference list. So it's the same order you would find them in the reference list. Do you say how many items there are in the measure? Do you say what the response options are? And do the labels have correct italics? So the numbers are not italicized, but the labels in parentheses after, so parenthesis, not at all, parenthesis, that not at all is italicized. The parentheses are actually not italicized. So check to make sure the italics are correct on your labels. Do you include a sample item? Do you say what it means to have a higher score? And do you have cutoff scores? If you're not sure about any of this, go back to the original outlines, the original templates, and see examples, see more detail. Because for this, I tried to keep it fairly, very thorough, but I tried to keep each question reasonably short. For procedure, do you explain the first contact? Do you talk about informed consent? And remember, you need to use those words, informed consent. Do you talk about inclusion criteria? How groups will be assigned? Again, not everybody's going to have this. Some people will, but here it's the flip side. So under participants, we talked about when participants will be broken down into groups based on their demographics. Here, we're going to talk about if it's an experimental study, so if you're randomly assigning people to groups, you need to say how that is. They're going to draw from a hat. They're going to, there's a random number generator, something like, whatever you're going to do. And then you're going to describe what that manipulation is going to be briefly. You'll talk about how do they take the questionnaire. Is it paper and pencil, online, an interview with a clinician? What's the deal? The questionnaire order, so what order are you giving them in? What demographic questions are you asking? How are you debriefing? So how are you telling them what the study was about and giving them an opportunity to contact you if they have any questions? And how are you protecting the data? And really, you just kind of need to make a general, just like with informed consent, for protection of data, you just need to make a general statement about that you're going to protect the data. And those are parts of ethics. You'll learn more about those in statistics and especially in experimental psych. Whew, I think I need a drink. Results section. Do you clearly state the hypothesis? And then it says, are there any specific measure names used? But this is a case where you should not be using specific measure names. So remember, instead of saying the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale, you should say intelligence, because you're trying to be broad and approachable here. So mean and standard deviations for age, frequencies and percentages for race and sex. You need to have at least 5 total demographic factors, and you need to kind of make sure that your 2 factors are divided, that you include them either with the mean and standard deviations or with the frequencies and percentages. Remember, if you can have twice as much of something as someone else, twice as high, you will be reporting mean and standard deviation. But if it's something that you're either one or the other, it's a category and you're going to report frequencies and percentages. Do you talk about a t-test? Do you italicize the T with the rest of the word being in plain font with a hyphen when you talk about t-test? Sorry, I just blanked on what IV meant. Is the independent variable, which I also, it's the predictor, grouping. Those are some other terms that are sometimes a little more descriptive than independent and are helpful for students. So is the independent variable clearly introduced? Is the dependent variable clearly introduced? So you need to be very clear in your results section about what those are. Is there a statement about the p-value to be used for the t-test? Is the p italicized? What is the p-value? And it should be this first one. P space less than. Oh, I know what was wrong with this one before. I couldn't figure out because the spacing was right. But the problem here is that it's not italicized. The P isn't italicized. But you need spaces before and after this less than sign. The P needs to be italicized, and you do not use a 0 before 0.05. All right. Discussion. So summary paragraph, is there a paragraph summarizing the main purpose and research questions or hypothesis of the paper? Remember, this needs to be updated to reflect that now you're talking about a research question. Actually, your entire discussion section needs to be updated. Do you restate the main hypothesis without using jargon or measure names? So again, you don't use specific measure names yet. Do you explain why it'll be important or how it'll contribute? Implications, you interpret the findings. And I know that these are really big, broad questions. Go to the templates, go to the outline to get a better idea what's supposed to happen there. So do you interpret it? So do you say what it means, what it would mean? Do you connect it to past findings? So say this would be consistent. And notice I'm using prospective language. So would it be consistent or would it contrast with things if your hypothesis is supported? And do you tie it to theory? Do you say, what might explain this? And when I say tie it to theory, it doesn't mean like you don't have to find like the theory of evolution for your topic. But do you explain, not just say it fits with previous findings, but, it fits with the things people are saying about this, the way they're talking about it. And you might have something that says like theory in it, but you might not. Limitations, does it have a clear topic sentence? And big deal, are they focused on the current study? And then are they clear? Are there 3 of them that are clear and relevant? Same thing with professional applications, clear topic sentence, current study, clear and relevant, clear and relevant. For professional application, remember, you need to name a professional and it needs to be very specific to the study. Like it would be your finding applied to a profession. So how should someone do their job differently if your hypothesis is supported? Or you can even say, if it's not supported, what would it mean? Does the future research section have a clear topic sentence, at least 2 future directions in research related to the current study, and then clear and relevant, and it needs to be focused on a stated limitation. So the same format for those as with the literature review, but now for this research proposal, it's all going to be specific to your study. Conclusion, is there a clear restatement of the purpose and research question or hypothesis? Is there a strong take-home message? Does it feel like a wrap-up? Is it kind of feeling like you're ending things rather than just repeating exactly the same sentences you've used before? And just do your best to make it feel like a closing, like you're putting sort of a stamp of finality on it. Even though you're repeating the same points that have been in pretty much all these summary paragraphs, it's with a slightly different tone here for the conclusion. All right, check your APA quotes. How many direct quotes did you have? The current limit is 3. That might change in the future. I might actually lower that. Most of the best papers I get have 1 or 0 quotes. You do not need to have any quotes. Does it go over the limit of one long being defined in APA as 40 words or more, or 3 short? So if you have one really long quote, you cannot include more. Because the thing is, when there's no limit, sometimes students will fill up their entire paper with quotes from articles. And that's not your writing. That's not what writing is. Especially if you have minimal comment on those quotes. I don't care if you can find quotes. I really don't. I care if you can read and understand it well enough to put it in your own words. That's what I'm looking for you to do as a student. So that's why I have such strict limit on quotes, because it's so easy to slip into relying on quotes when really I want you to be learning how to paraphrase. Is each quote cited using proper APA style? Remember, you have to use quotation marks and you need to include a page number in addition to the normal citation. And make sure your punctuation is correct for that. There are at least 2 in-text citations for each paragraph of actually it's an introduction section now. And so that's just kind of a reminder to go back through and check, are the in-text citations in correct APA style? Is the references section on a separate page? Is it in alphabetical order? Are the references in appropriate APA style? What citation and reference mistakes, if any, did you notice? Some of this you can also take from your revision plan or copy into your revision plan. Other APA style stuff, we're close. Running head appear on each page. Is there a page number? Do the words running head appear only on the title page? Remember, the title page has a different top header than the rest of the paper because it includes the word running head. And actually, this is misleading because it really, I'm not going to change the form, but it's running head like that. The rest of it is capitalized. Is the whole paper in 12-point Times New Roman font, double spaced with no other space between the paragraphs? Does the paper have the correct headings? Does the writing make sense? Is it overly wordy or unclear? Does each paragraph have a purpose? So really going through and thinking about overall, what is the quality of your writing? Does each paragraph have a topic sentence? Do you notice any grammar, spelling, punctuation errors? My guess is at this point you probably won't, because you've edited it so hard that if there are any errors, it's because you don't know that they're errors. But still do a good read through on paper to see if you can catch things that you didn't catch digitally. And then this is really if you are, this is more for peer feedback. Did you as editor fix those errors as you went? This last one, again, is not terribly critical anymore, and your final paper now is probably going to be a little bit longer than this. Is the total paper 7 to 8 pages? That's a requirement in other classes that I just kind of forgot to take out of here. You are, a good literature review is typically going to be around this length, but now that you're doing your research proposal, it'll probably be 1 to 2 pages longer than this. So 9 to 10 pages, 8 to 10 pages is sort of a normal range. I don't put a really strict limit because I don't want you to I don't want you to be focused on filling pages, because then I get a lot of fluff and then students run out of room at the end. I want you to be focused on high quality information the whole way through. And then go ahead and do these last questions too. What are 2 areas you see for improvement for this paper? And what are 2 strengths of this paper? So do this for yourself. What are some ways you could make your paper better? And this might be like, okay, if I were to start over again, what would I do differently? And then 2 things that you think you did really well. So that is the entire peer feedback. You're going to do a self-assessment that goes through all of this. And my hope, again, the real purpose of this is so that to help you learn to look very carefully through your paper. You might even pull up the rubric for the paper as you do this. There's a lot more detail there, especially about how I evaluate your quality of writing. But my goal is to help you learn how to do these final edits. And part of it is going through very carefully and systematically checking for errors. You are so gosh darn close to being done, and I'm so excited for you. Thanks. Bye.